All right, so I want to make a quick video here about how important it is to actually try to spread the antinatalist ideology, and talk a little bit about my experience with that, and then also share some of the organizing tactics that I've, actually been taught in sort of a professional setting, for an unrelated cause. And then before I get started, I'd also like to thank the user Just Another YouTuber 3 for, pointing out that in my previous video I sounded like maybe I thought people should just be antinatalist themselves and then not bother trying to communicate or convert other people, which I would say is wrong. I would say, if you're able to do it, I think it's a great thing to do, right? Because any one life that is spared, any one person that doesn't have to go through this is really quite a big win. I'm trying to remember, I think it's on the Antinatalism subreddit, but whenever somebody asks, what difference can I really make by not having one kid? There's like an automated bot response about, there being tens of thousands of starfish on a beach that are going to dry out and die. And there's like a little kid that is throwing the starfish back in the ocean. There's like a jaded old man that comes along and he's like, "You're never going to get all of them, kid." But the kid is like, "Well, I got that one," right? So it's just the idea that, yeah, we're probably never going to turn everybody, but we can turn as many people as possible, and each one person that you're able to turn is a victory. So, because also if you turn one person, that is probably multiple children too that they're not having, which is, is great. And then their children, and then their children, and their children, right? So I would say every one person you're able to convince of antinatalism may be, who knows how many lives of suffering you're really preventing there. So that's sort of the why. Now I'm going to talk about the how as far as I've learned it. One of the most important things to think about here is that you need to be in a one-on-one setting if you're going to try to convince somebody of something like this. So that's really like a big key. So first you need to think about like who is going to be receptive to this message, that of the people that I'm able to talk to. So, maybe if you're thinking of your friends, or you're thinking of somebody at your, workplace, or in your family, you got to recognize that there are some people that like are never really going to be convinced. And then there are some people that are like, it's a coin toss. Like, maybe they will come around, but it seems unlikely. Then there's some people where like they're probably receptive to the message, but they just haven't heard it yet. They haven't been exposed to it, and nobody's really pushed them to like make that shift. And so obviously that last group of people are the people that you want to get in a one-on-one conversation setting, right? Because if you're trying to have that conversation in a big group of people, or even with another one or two people there, the odds are they're not going to be in agreement with your message, and they will sort of give the person an out and make you seem like the lone nut person who is just a little crazy, right? So you have to be in a one-on-one conversation, ideally, with these people that are receptive to the message. So once you're in that setting, you have to think of sort of a lead-in line. And I think for this purpose, a good one might be something like, wow, I've seen so many people that have had babies in the midst of this pandemic recession thing. And that's crazy. It really blows my mind, and that's a lead-in line that is kind of good for testing the waters. And if somebody like resonates with that and they understand, then, like you're going to be able to move forward. If not, it's probably like a lost cause. And then, the next thing, like after you've sort of thrown that in there and they've like demonstrated some sort of receptiveness, is you have to then kind of shift over to listening as much as possible, and listening to, their concerns. So maybe their concern is the economy and how they're having a hard time finding a job that they feel is like upwardly mobile, or maybe they can't afford healthcare, or they're not sure if they're ever going to be able to retire. And there's a lot of things it could be, but what you ultimately need to do is take those concerns and then connect them to our cause of antinatalism. And you need to show, like, well, yeah, you're right. It is a really terrible economy. And, I've seen a lot of articles about how difficult it is to raise children right now, and how a lot of parents are very frustrated by having to be with their kids 24/7 if schools are closed, and the price of daycare, and how a lot of parents are just really like snapping and very sort of upset during this time. And I actually think maybe that would be even more of an argument for like a child-free angle. But I think probably a better way would be like, yeah, things were looking bad even before the pandemic, and trying to think about like 50 years from now, what things are going to look like, and you could say something along the lines of like, yeah, I'm somebody that I just don't think it is fair to bring someone into this, or I don't think it's fair to have somebody kind of like be on this ride as it's falling apart over the next 100 years or 120 years. And then if they're, receptive to that, then you might throw out the term antinatalism, say like, yeah, there's actually sort of like a community of people that think this way. You'd probably want to connect them with the subreddit. And then I think like from there, you'd probably be good. Sort of another angle that you could take from this would be would be like seeing what you can find out about them. Like if you find out they're vegan, you can probably you might be able to take it from, like, use that to your advantage as like an inroad. You might be able to say, there's so much suffering, there's so much exploitation, and sort of like make the obvious connection between that and the vegan world in terms of like breeding people into this kind of whole exploitative slaughterhouse thing, and then making that connection to the suffering and the exploitation and the breeding of humans. Or if that maybe they've like that there's somebody who's depressed or whatever, then or even if they're leftist, like there's all these ways where if these other causes that they believe in, you can sort of then convince them of antinatalism through that cause that's already there. Now, my experience with this kind of thing, because like I have done this to some extent with antinatalism, I've had a lot of these conversations. Maybe about 10 people I've tried to convince of it, which, I mean, I guess maybe isn't a lot, but they've been 10 fairly close people in my life, like my best friend, another best friend, brother, like a few other people, right? And so I've been able to convince one person, which was a big win. And they still see things, they see things basically the same way that I do in that regard now. I was able to take them from, they didn't even realize that like having kids was a choice, to being full antinatalist. So that was a big win. And that was basically just through, with us both being leftists, and at the time they were vegetarian. And so I was able to kind of like work that around to, and they also had issues with depression. So I was able to like work those commonalities to a point of them understanding and being amenable to antinatalism. The rest of the people have it, like maybe like the other like 9 people I haven't been as successful with, and I think that part of that is, for some of them, they have a little niece or nephew, or they have a something like that where they, they like the kid, and they're like, oh, having kids isn't bad because look at my niece, right? Which is not valid reasoning, right? It's the point of antinatalism that we want to spare your niece from being destroyed and suffering in this world. Then some other people seem to sort of just shake it off through like optimism, like, well, yeah, there are bad things, but there are good things too. So sometimes you're able to get them, sometimes you're not, but hopefully this has been helpful. So I guess just to summarize, I do think it's very important to try to spread this ideology especially when like, you identify people that are potentially good, like amenable to it. And, it's also important to sort of work on any ideological similarities that you have with them to try to move them, along the position. And then I think just sort of like taking in a lot of antinatalist content so that you know how to respond to a lot of the common, arguments. I think that's important too. So I think I'm going to call it a day on this video here, and I will talk to you in the next one.